Well, hello everyone. You're all very welcome today to today's Causeway online event with Mike Stevenson. We have a great mix of people here today, members, non-members, people calling in from Scotland, Ireland,
hello.
Ireland. So you're all very, very welcome. Those that don't know me, I'm Aoife. I'm Causeway's Events and Membership Engagement Manager. It's my responsibility to help grow the membership of Causeway by hosting these networking events. Those that don't know Causeway, it's a networking organization with a goal to facilitate trade and boost operations between Ireland, Scotland and Northern Ireland, no matter what the economic and political landscape is. I will now pass you over to my co-host today, Bridget Worski. She's a business coach with Envision and she's also the director of Causeway. Over to you, Bridget.
Thanks very much, Aoife, and welcome everybody. First of all, Aoife, did you say we're recording this?
Oh, sorry, we're recording this session today.
Yeah, we're recording this, which was in the registration, but just to let you know, so some of our members who wanted to attend and were unable to can hear from our speaker. And we're delighted to have everybody here today from so many different locations. I'm in really lovely sunny Edinburgh, which is lovely. We have both members and non-members of Causeway, or potential members as we like to call them. So let me just take a minute to give you a quick overview of what Causeway is all about for those who mightn't be that familiar with us. So as Aoife said, we're a membership organisation and we're supported by the Scottish and the Irish governments. And we're here really to support networking, collaboration and doing business across the Irish Sea. That's what we're all about. We're all about bringing people together and helping to connect people in a way that mightn't be possible without the Causeway platform. We also have an association with the British Irish Trade Alliance, BITA, so our corporate members can enjoy joint BITA and Causeway membership. A statistic I love to throw out at these events is that there are 14,000 Irish people living and working in Scotland, and there's 8,000 Scots living and working in Ireland. And if you take that number and add to it all of the organisations and individuals who want to do business or collaborate across Ireland, Scotland and Northern Ireland, that is a huge network out there that Causeway would love to connect with. So we're running these events free, and an ask that we make is, if you like what you hear and you feel Causeway brings some benefits, please introduce some of your connections to Causeway, because we are really keen to grow our network. We have a reputation of being quite a friendly and accessible membership organisation, and our members benefit from the kind of events and roundtables that we run. So we're running about 2 a month at the moment, although we're taking August off to let everybody have a break. And they range from kind of general events like this one on a general topic to sector-specific events and roundtables where we really focus on collaboration and connections in a particular sector. We can connect our members with influencers, with government officials, with decision makers and politicians. Our network tends to be quite senior and quite influential. So that's a benefit that our members get. We're able to make those connections for them and support them. And we love partnering with our members to either run events or to facilitate networking and connections and introductions in some way. We are a membership organisation and we're here to serve our members. So we love to talk to our members about what would work for you. And finally, we have a growing young professionals network, some of whom are here today. So you're welcome. And we are both excited about the voice of young professionals and how they can influence us, and also how we can support them with their careers. So that's a little bit about what Causeway is about. And if you have any questions and would like to chat to us, contact Aoife, contact myself. We'd be delighted to talk to you. But that's enough about that. You didn't come here to listen to me talking about Causeway. You came here to listen to our keynote speaker. So I'm excited to introduce you to Mike Stevenson. Mike is from the wonderfully named agency Thinktastic, award-winning agency. They won Scottish Small Company of the Year. And Mike is a keynote speaker, an entrepreneur, a motivational speaker, and somebody who has a truly inspirational life story to tell. Every time I talk to Mike, I learn something new. Today I learned he's a native Thin Lizzy and might even have sung with them. There you go. Mike has worked with loads of organisations, including Marks and Spencer's, British Gas, Sky, Standard Life, Disney, and he has also won Business Community, the Business in the Community Award 3 years running, and the New Start magazine's Better Places Award. So he's our award-winning speaker. He's also a TEDx speaker, and he recently joined the likes of Steve Wozniak from Apple in a Transatlantic leadership event. So we are in fantastic company. So I'm going to hand you over to Mike. Mike is going to speak. I'd invite you to write down any kind of comments or questions you have in the chat. And at the end, when we come to the Q&A, we'll look at the chat and bring you in, and there'll be a chance for open questions. So Mike, you're very welcome, and over to you.
Hello, everyone. I have to say, this is a very unfamiliar environment for me because I excel on stage. That's where I like being the most. I move about, I'm very animated, and I can see the audience and I can hear them laughing and crying. So this is very different for me. I also normally wear trousers when I'm speaking on stage. Undergarments don't really matter, do they? But I want to start. You see, my contention is that times like this are really count for something, and they count for something really quite extraordinarily positive. Although we're feeling an enormous amount of discomfort, and we've been, dislocated in so many ways thanks to COVID. And I want to talk about the mantra that I developed when I was much younger and sleeping out in the streets of London. This was in 1966, 67. I know. I don't look that age, do I? I hope not. And, there was a time then where I really was, what we say in Scotland is down on your hawkers. I was down there, and I couldn't see any way that I could go further down apart from just dying on the street. So I said to myself, the best is yet to come, and I started repeating it to myself. And I've retained that belief ever since, and it has worked out for me, because I know that in times of darkness, there are shards of light. And if you spot those shards of light, it can shine, a light on something that you've never envisaged before. And I'll talk about a few examples of this kind of reinvention which can take place. When I was in my late teens and early 20s, this is post my period in Dublin when I was busking for a year, and I met up with Thin Lizzy and became good friends with them. But people used to mistake me for Cat Stevens. So my nickname became Cat. And Cat Stevens is a very interesting story because in the late 60s, remember he had hits with Matthew and Son and I'm Gonna Get Me a Gun and I Love My Dog, very poppy songs. And he contracted TB and he spent 6 months in hospital, really quite ill. And during that period, he wrote the contents of a new album, which was Mona Bona Jack on. And he completely reinvented who he was and the kind of songs he sang. They were much more reflective. They were much more, about the issues of the world. And of course, he became a huge success and his albums sold hugely. So it can happen to all of us. And I've used every period of my life when things have gone wrong to not necessarily to reinvent myself, but to learn new skills, to experience new things, because that opens up new possibilities. I did an acting course a couple of weeks ago. It's not my first foray into acting. I have appeared in Taggart. For those of you that don't know, Taggart is the Glasgow detective series which always starts with a line, "There's been a murder." And there I was, sit at the end of a bar, a basement bar in Glasgow. This is 5:30 in the morning, by the way. Very unglamorous. And they've got a smoke machine pumping out smoke. And I'm sitting at the end of the bar with a pint of lager and a cigarette in my hand, puzzling over a Sun crossword. That is acting, by the way. And about 7 o'clock, I went upstairs for a wee breather. And there were lights shining on the front of the pub. And there was this little woman passing, trailing a shopping basket at 7 o'clock in the morning. And she says, "What are you doing, son?" I says, "We're filming an episode of Taggart." And she said, "I hope it's not one of their repeats." So life is full of joy and it's full of the unexpected. And listening to what people say is one of the greatest stimulants that we all have. So I want to just look into the future. And my contention, I'm going to use a few slides as well. My contention is this, that possibilities at this time really do abound. And we think about, the world just now, apart from COVID-19, we know that there's a kind of political storm across the world. There is huge conflict, there's racial conflicts, and there's climate change. These are things that have to be addressed. And I take joy in, the fact that people are coming up with all kinds of ideas to tackle climate change. This is a wildflower garden in a church in Holland. And the reason this garden is full of wildflowers is that they've developed in Holland a confetti. When you throw it in the air and it lands, it doesn't scatter litter, it plants wildflower seeds. I think that's amazing. Is my slideshow suddenly gone?
Mike, we can't see your slideshow, but I'll get it up. What number slide are you on?
Oh, you're not?
Is it 3?
He's on slide 4, I think, Aoife, the flowers.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Can you...
Aoife is sharing it now.
I'll share it, yeah.
All right, that's great.
Okay.
Can everyone else see it?
Yeah.
Yes, so this is the kind of small invention which can make a dramatic impact on the environment and also bring a bit of colour into people's lives. Next slide. I've always wanted to say that. This is Google in America, who give their employees free bicycles. That's a very imaginative idea. And when you think about it, the impact of that is absolutely massive. Not only on the carbon emissions, but also it's creating a healthier workforce. And Google are very good at doing that. I want to ask a question about Google in a few minutes, but can we go to the next slide? Cities are going to be redesigned. This is a very futuristic view. It's an American view, and this is one of the prototype designs for how one city in America might look in the future. And you'll see there's greenery everywhere, and of course they've got carbon-free transport and all the rest of it. So this is happening as we speak. And every day I hear of new ideas that are being rapidly progressed. And this thing about pace is really important, because you can't afford to sit on what you're doing for too long, because it can become a habit. And work and business should never become a habit. It should be a constant reinvention, looking at new ways of doing things. And I've tried to do that all my life, hence me on Zoom just now. And next slide, please. This is another development we're going to see, and it's about food. We have lived through the supermarket age, the great big supermarkets. And of course, with trade deals coming up, which might not necessarily fill our heart with glad joy, we're now seeing more package-free shops. So you can go in and you can fill up your jars and your packets. There's one in Reef Walk in Edinburgh, and it's a growing phenomenon. We're going to see much more of that. And actually now in Germany, they've got package-free supermarkets of the scale that we see supermarkets as they are just now, heavily packaged, having to use plastic bags and all the rest of it. Next slide. I want to tell a story about someone who is my hero. And, Cat Stevens aside, Phil Lynott aside, I've got a few heroes. And this is one. Has anyone heard of the city of Curitiba in southern Brazil? The city of Curitiba is a changed city. It's an extraordinary city. And it all started with this guy who was an architect called Jaime Lerner, who stood for mayor on the ticket that he wanted to create a city designed for people. Now, I say that because so often we are driven by a vision which is not a positive one, but a negative one. In other words, carbon free, tackling climate change, eradicating poverty. Rather than saying we create new prosperity, he went for a city designed for people. And I'll tell you a couple of things he did in order to achieve this. Can we move to the next slide? This is now a city of 1.8 million people. And it has got the world's best transport system. It's got, tram, train, bus, and different speeds of buses as well. And look at the stops. Aren't they sexy? Well, I think they're sexy. They were designed by children because he involved the whole city in helping to make this vision come to life. And he used children. When I say used children, he tapped into children's enormous creativity and the way they see the world, which is always very positive. So that transport system has more people using it on a daily basis than uses New York's transport system. New York, a city of 8.5 million people. This is a city with 1.8 million. Imagine the difference that has made to the air quality in that city. But he also, next slide, he created more green space all around the city. He's got a park that rings the whole city. He's got sheep grazing so they don't have to use grass cutting. And it means now that each citizen has 64.5 square meters of green space. That's how it works out. And it wasn't like that in the beginning. He had to do some things that were really quite extraordinarily imaginative. And I'll pose the question to you. The favelas in Brazil are really bad, as we're now seeing in Rio de Janeiro, where people are dying because, the disease is fermenting there. It's like a Petra dish. And he went out to the slum dwellers and he said, I want you to recycle your waste. You can imagine, it wasn't a priority for people who were living on the very margins of life. But he said, I will give you food and football tickets in exchange. Now, football tickets are huge in Brazil because people in the slums can't go to football matches. They can't afford it. And of course, food was a priority. But he went further than that. And he said, I want to build new homes, but I want you to be involved in building your homes. And I want to train you up and give you, a good wage in the building industry. That's great. So these people saw a vision which included them. Next slide. He also said to his operations director, how long will it take me to pedestrianize a street? And they said, 6 months, 9 months. He said, I want it done in 48 hours. Did they do it in 48 hours? Absolutely they did. And on the Monday morning, because this was done over the weekend, on the Monday morning, children were not tethered to their parents. People were walking freely. People were sitting, eating sandwiches. And by the way, they were looking in the windows and they were spending more money. So all the neighbouring shopkeepers came to look at this and they said, we want some of that. Now, if he had allowed that to delay, there'd be objections because people have to see the reality, taste it before they will accept. So 48 hours was a turnaround on this. Next slide. So because of his, offer to the slum dwellers of getting them involved and giving them the skills in the building trade, 60% of lower income people now are involved in construction. It's a win-win. But he said three things as a result of his, achievement. He said, take 1 0 off the budget and you've got creativity. Take 2 zeros off the budget and you've got genuine sustainability. But, he said, you've got to beat off the complexity sellers, or we say here, the naysayers. Those people that always find a reason for not progressing, for taking time to do something because you want to test it to the nth degree. People who want to set up a whole system and a process, which by the time you have achieved it, you're probably going to be behind the competition. Does that make sense? So he achieved that. So final slide in that section. One man's vision transformed a city of 1.8 million people. And 98% of the population of Curitiba were very, very happy. They wanted to live there for the rest of their life. But here's the rub. 70% of the city of Sao Paulo also wanted to live there the rest of their life. It's extraordinary. GDP has gone up, average earnings have gone up, and it's a city that is revered for its ecosystems. So there is a success story. And it shows you that anything can be achieved with a bit of imagination by bringing people along with you. Is that the end of that section? No, there's more. There's more. The other area at the moment where so much is being done is around the improvement of health. Now, we know that that technology is playing a huge part. I'm going to focus on two things that are Scottish-based, that involved no technology whatsoever. Next slide. This is a surgery in the north of Scotland that prescribes vegetable boxes provided by the local farmer. So it's a win-win, it's a collaboration. And I'm going to talk about collaboration much, a bit later on in this. But it's an extraordinary thing because the doctor is saying, yes, I will prescribe you your medicine, but I also want you to take this vegetable box and here's some recipes that you can use. That's going to improve your health. That's remarkable, isn't it? And also in the Highlands, next slide, they're prescribing nature, NHS Highland, which is great. They're prescribing the environment, walks in the environment, they're organising walks, they're organising all kinds of opportunities for people to experience the natural environment, which has got huge health benefits. And actually, those of us that have lived through the last few months of lockdown, we've seen a huge change around us. I live down by the Water of Leith, and we've got ducks walking past my window. That never happened before. We've seen, a killer whale in the Moray Firth. That's never happened before. It's extraordinary. So we're now beginning to realise that nature and our interaction with nature is really important. Is there another slide in that section? I'm not sure. Oh, yes, there is. And the other thing which we are going to see a revolution in is food. There is something about the way that food is distributed at the moment. For example, fish caught in Aberdeen, until fairly recently, was transported down to London and then transported back to London, and we had to pay the transport fees, right? Until Aldi and Lidl came along, and they had a different relationship with local suppliers. And of course, Tesco and Sainsbury's and all the others followed. But I think we're going to see, a lot more of a shift around food, the distribution of food, because we cannot have, people not eating nutritious food, because all of the health impacts of that are quite extraordinary. This is a food share project in Canada, which has had a great success going into some of the poorer communities. And do you know what the Canadians say? They say there are three things that we could regenerate communities. And one of them is sport, the other is the arts, and the third one is food. More colour. Do you know the impact of colour can have on us? Let me give you an example. Can we move to the next slide? This is in a city called Tirana in Albania. Now, because I'm a Hibernian supporter, I went to Tirana in the early 70s. It was a god-awful place. Everything was in this kind of battleship grey. And along comes an artist who, again, stands for mayor. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? We've had an architect and we've had a painter standing for mayor. And he went around and he asked people what they were looking for to make their life feel better. And of course, they didn't ask for multi-million-pound budgets. That's the expectation, isn't it? People will say, we want more money spent on this, more money spent on that. They asked for three things. They wanted their civic spaces cleared up, they wanted more colour, and they wanted more trees planted. So he did that. He painted the whole city in bright colours. And he planted 15,000 trees and they cleared up the civic spaces. One of the impacts of that is that crime came down quite dramatically. And this shopkeeper who used to have to roll down the shutters every night says, I don't need to do that anymore because there's no crime. So this is the kind of, it is sometimes small things that make huge impacts. And often, we start with a proposition that has to be big, it has to be a big change. And it's those little progressions that can make a massive impact. So Tirana now is attracting tourists because of its colour. People go from all over the world because they want to see the colours of Tirana. And Mayor Edi Rama, who set this all up, is now the Prime Minister of Albania. It shows you the impact he made as a politician because he believed him. Next slide. I love this because it is an advert. And you see, I'm into creativity in a big way. I had a creative agency and I still use creative thinking in just about everything I do. And I work with clients to find new ways of doing things that sometimes spring surprises. And those surprises can make a huge difference. Now, this is a job advert that McDonald's put up in Sweden. These are huge billboard adverts, by the way. And you can't see the small text, can you? But it says, we don't hire Turks, Greeks, Poles, Indians, Ethiopians, Vietnamese, Chinese, or Peruvians. And you think, that's terrible. But you look at the small print and it says, we don't care. We employ where you come from. We employ the best people, and we have people from 95 different countries working in McDonald's in Sweden. I find that genius, because when you see we're an equal opportunities employer, it begins to, you begin to kind of tire of that message. Do you necessarily believe it? That says something about the culture of the company that just hits you between the eyes. And I love that. Next slide. This is an amazing company in Edinburgh called Studio LR. And Lucy, who is a kind of head designer and partner, actually, she gave me these a few years ago, and it was looking at how we can use graphic art to shift behaviors or to shift moods. And here's a very simple one. There's a sink and a gimme 5. Would children wash their hands more with that confronting them when they went to a toilet? Absolutely they would. Next slide. Hospitals are full of signs that people just don't understand. And in a children's hospital, why not say it as it is? You've got a sore tummy. It's great, isn't it? Or make the difficult situation more fun. Nino, Nino, Nino. It's brilliant, isn't it? That's going to relax children who are anxious. Actually, I'll tell you a story about a hospital in Montreal, a children's hospital. And one of the directors of the hospital wanted to see if they could collaborate and improve, outputs for the hospital. So they brought in a Disney-like digital company. And the company walked around and it spoke to people and it did all kinds of, inquiring for the first few days. And then it came up with 3 ideas which have made a massive impact on that hospital and its costs and its outputs. The first one is that he noticed that children, when they came in, they were very anxious in this new environment, as you would be. I remember going to the hospital to get my tonsils out when I was 6, and I was terrified. So he got films of the children's bedroom and they played it at the end of the bed. So the children lay down in the bed, sat up, because children don't want to lie down, and there is their bedroom playing at the bottom of the bed. They also decided that those tools that nurses and doctors use can look very threatening to children. So they created an animation, showing, all the tools, the syringes, the stethoscope, all of these things, showing them as friendly animated characters. So by the time the doctors came and they had to use these implements, the children gave them names. They had names for them, and the doctors complied with this. Now, the reason I mention this is it improved outputs, it improved recovery times, and it made the hospital far more effective, not just efficient. The final thing was a major discovery in the burns unit. Now, you think of burns as being incredibly sore, which they are. How do you rid yourself of the pain? It's very, very difficult. Well, what they discovered was if they showed a film of the polar ice caps, people began to feel less pain. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Now, hospitals working with digital creative companies, it's not something you often see. Why not? I want to talk about collaboration in a moment, but I want to do a poll, right? Because Aoife's got a poll. We can do it now, Aoife. And, you know, we think about companies that are constantly evolving, constantly reinventing themselves. How do they do it? And how often do they have to keep reinventing themselves? If you look at a company like Google, now I was speaking in London a couple of years ago, and there was a representative from Google speaking just before me. And he talked about the difference that Google are going to see over the next 10 years. So the question to you, what percentage of what Google currently does will in their view be retained in 10 years? So just put your answer as quickly as you can and submit. Oh, well, the majority got it absolutely right. 55% said 10%. That's right. This is pre-COVID. The Google saw in the next 10 years to be a 90% churn of what they're doing. Now that's extraordinary, isn't it? So that's a big company because its motivation is not financial target, it's to stay ahead of the competition. And they do it really, really well. And they also diversify. You know, the driverless car actually came from Google, and they have had to collaborate with Ford to get them built. So it came from an employee of Google, because Google say to their staff, you know, you can have 20% of your working week away from your main workplace, as long as you're looking and researching and, you know, thinking about how we can improve what we do or what else we can introduce to our package of, you know, services. So that's the churn, 90%. So if you think of it, that should be a churn for most businesses in a way, shouldn't it? And you were spot on. You were spot on with your analysis, 90%. So if you think about what you're doing today and forget COVID, what COVID has done is give us time to think. It's given us time to refocus. It's given us time to, you know, recalibrate and maybe to do other things. I've got myself fit. I was doing boxing classes, actually, and I feel great as a result of it. Would I have done that if it hadn't been for this break? Would I have done the acting classes if it hadn't been for this break? I don't know if I would have. Would I have done so much experimental cooking as I've been doing recently? No, I probably wouldn't have. So, you know, and in business terms, you know, it is a great time to reflect, to review, to reinvent, and to adapt. That's my proposition for the day, okay? Can we go to the next slide, Aoife? I don't normally, right, so if we could go back to the, right, this is the one before that, actually. Oh no, before it. Is that still order? It's the one with, yeah, this one, the one above it. And I'll tell you the story because a young guy called Kevin Richardson in the States had this idea. And it was an idea to tackle one of these intractable problems that every nation on earth faces. It's the one of speeding cars. Now, it's very interesting, isn't it, that speeding hasn't come down. It simply hasn't come down. And we've used the camera to catch people. And, you know, the police get lots of money in their coffers as a result of it, but it hasn't actually changed the problem. So this young guy had an idea, and the idea was to use a different kind of camera and to offer something positive and introduce a bit of fun. So we created the speed lottery camera. And the speed lottery camera, you know, if you're going under the speed limit, it flashes up. Thank you. Congratulations, you've been entered for the speed lottery draw. If you go over the speed limit, it says, thank you, you've contributed to the speed lottery draw. Do you know that the only city that took it up was Stockholm, and speeding came down by an average of 22%. So, you know, that is the power of our creative minds when we get down to looking at what we do and trying to find different outcomes, trying to make more money, trying to attract new markets. This wall is in Dresden. Has everyone seen this before? Because it's in a part of Dresden. You know, Dresden was very badly bombed during the war. And this building, an old sort of gable end type thing, look at the colour of it and look at the tubing. There's something very distinctive about this wall. Can you just move to the next slide? When it rains, it plays music. Now, people come from all over the world to see this. And of course, they've got, you know, cafes building up around this area, because when people come here, they want to sit down, they want to drink coffee, they want to have meals. It's a fantastic idea, isn't it? We need to be looking at some of these things to create, you know, major landmarks out of nothing, like Curitiba did, like the city of Tirana did, like Dresden did. Next slide. This is why don't we get children designing playgrounds? It's a question we really should ask. There's an example of a children's playground in America that did just that. They brought in children and they said, we want you to design your own playground. And what do children say? They don't say, where's the budget coming from? They don't say, you know, we need a special kind of acrylic paint, or can we put this off till tomorrow? It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Children don't do that. They get straight down to it. And these kids designed a beautiful coloured playground. Then they brought a professional designer in just to look at health and safety issues. And of course, he said, you know, if you're coming down that beautifully designed slide, you don't want to be bumping into someone on a swing. And the kids said, actually, we do. But he managed to persuade them that a wee bit of spatial adjustment was needed. And then they brought in engineering students from the nearby college. And they said to them, can you add value to this playground? So after they'd finished, we created a playground that, because of kinetic energy, every time a child uses it, it's generating electricity for the local community. That's the power of imagination. It's the power of creativity, and it's also the power of collaboration. What's the next slide? And in Finland, of course, older people's playgrounds became very fashionable and very well used, because Finland was trying to tackle its health problems. It's hard to imagine that Finland had a worse cardiac record than Scotland did in the early 70s. And they have transformed it. It's now the healthiest country in the world. And that's just one of the initiatives they developed, older people's playgrounds. Bring it on, I say. Next slide. Right. One of the things I want to talk about are some of the trends that are happening just now that you might recognize. Does anyone know Blinkist? Because Blinkist is the most extraordinary example of this bite-sized learning, this micro-learning. I've got it on my phone, and it's extraordinary because it breaks down all these books into little segments, and it does an abbreviation of them, and you can listen to them. You can also listen to audiobooks. You can learn about a whole range of things. It's extraordinary. And this is a trend where, you know, people don't have time to do traditional learning. So they're finding ways of doing it. You know, they've got language apps. There's all kinds of things going on. But this is a major, major trend. This is the app of the year, and it's based in Berlin, Blinkist. If you haven't looked at it, look at it. It's absolutely extraordinary. Next. Anyone who's seen, you know, virtual reality? How about, you know, teaching children immersive learning by actually taking them into an environment in which they might have been, you know, thousands of years ago. And it's a phenomenal tool. And we haven't used it to its full extent. I don't know why, but now we are beginning to see the benefit, because you can transport people into somewhere outside their sphere of experience and give them a sense of the environment. So visual immersive learning with VR is going to become much bigger. That's one of the trends. Next one is, shops. In fact, a whole number of places that, people come into. There is a sense that we need to be creating kind of ambient well-being environments. So here's one with little rocks and grassy bits. And you think about it, when you go into a space, you want to not just see what to buy, not just have a transaction, but to feel something. You need an experience. So I think we're going to see a massive shift in the retail experience. And it'll be a race to find out who can create the best possible experience, something that's not online. Because you can't compete with online if all you're doing is offering stuff on a shelf that you can buy. Does that make sense? And of course, one of the big problems we have is burnout, it's mental health. Any company, any individual that is now offering, some support around mental health, anything to improve mental health. And you'll see there are apps now where you can relax, you can listen to the sounds of, running water. This is a whole world out there. Health is a massive area, and mental health has become one of the major concerns of Western societies. And America, Britain, and Australia have got the highest rates of mental health now, which tells you something about the environment. I want to talk about collaboration. Can I first of all ask you to do another poll? And this one, because collaboration is the answer. One person meeting someone else. And I'll give you an example before we go on. A pizzeria shop owner was sitting next to a bookshop owner, and they're both complaining about a lack of business. And someone came past, a friend of theirs, and he said, why don't you just shove the two shops together, create a pizzeria bookshop? They did, and it became very profitable. It was a hit in Brooklyn, in New York. So how likely are you in the next 3 months to collaborate with a business you do not even know of at the moment? Can you fill out that poll, and we'll see the results of that, because this is very interesting. Oh, quite likely 44%. That's brilliant, isn't it? A certainty 28%, very likely 70%. So most people are saying yes. Well, that's brilliant, because collaboration now is the most imaginative business tool we have at our disposal. And if we go to the next slide, that slide that we were on, this is one between the Danish online clothing company, ASOS, and just down a bit, there we are, and GLAD. GLAD is the LGBT charity, which is now global. And what ASOS are doing is designing special edition clothing with some of the messages the LGBT community wants to hear. So that's a very imaginative one. It's also saying that ASOS has got its eye on the world and the challenges of the world. The next one is Uber and Spotify, because if you get into an Uber car now, in the States, at least at the moment, next slide, you'll be able to plug in your Spotify, you'll be able to hear the music of your choice in the car. It's a very imaginative, it's quite a kind of fun, not going to make a huge difference to the world, but it shows you how two organizations, two companies with entirely different businesses can find common ground. The next slide, Apple have gone into partnership with, next slide, MasterCard. MasterCard has got reach all over the world. Apple has got the tools to reach all over the world, and they've now got an entirely digital MasterCard. So these are companies that would not have looked at each other a few years ago. That's the future. It's about collaboration. All that is human as possible. Can we just switch off the slideshow, and let me just summarize. the future is exciting. I always find, disruption, I always find uncertainty, whilst terrifying and uncomfortable, I find it quite exciting. This is a time when we go back to work, do we want to go back to all that we did before? Or should we look at new ways of doing things? Should we look at, reassigning the people who work with us? Do we look to, developing new technologies? One of the things that Google has as part of its value system is fast is better than slow. Now, this has not always been a British, I don't know about Irish, I don't think it's always been, the way, the view of change, but Google puts it right up there because they know that you have to rapidly deploy new technologies, new ideas, because you have to stay ahead of the competition. It is a race. And as long as you've got that competitive advantage, then you are moving in the right direction. But competitive advantage can be overtaken by someone very, very quickly, can't it? So how do we create this excitement around what we do to make sure that we're always looking to find something new, to find, a technology that's going to help us, to find a collaboration that we might never have thought of? And think of collaborations that you might engage with. And I'm always looking for collaborators, right? And not enough people come forward to me. And I find that a wee bit depressing. Is it something I've said? Is it the way I look? I don't know. But I think this is a really exciting time. The best is yet to come. And I'm 70 now. And I still think the best is yet to come, right? Because I don't intend to retire at any time until I fall and I can't move. And even then, I'll probably find a camera somewhere, because life is about the excitement of exploration, about constantly evolving yourself, constantly learning new things, constantly meeting new people, constantly creating new collaborations. And in business, that excitement should be fever pitch, because this is what we're here for in business. It's not just to set out a financial plan. Yes, money becomes part of it. If you focus on the money, the finance, you find yourself being run by a spreadsheet. Or as Margaret, who's also on this Zoom call, will say, imagine if a tennis player was looking at the scoreboards rather than the competition on the other side of the net. That's how a lot of businesses are run in this country. And we've got to change that. So this is a time of excitement. Thank you very much for listening and, sacrificing an hour in the sun just to listen to me. Thank you so much. And of course, we're going to have questions, aren't we?
Yes, we are, Mike. Thanks so much. That was amazing. And if people want to start putting any comments or questions into the chat, we can pull you into the discussion then. I've made lots of notes, but one of the big things that resonated with me is just, be open to possibility, to collaboration, to change, to innovation, and also, if in doubt, be purposeful. Do something meaningful.
Yeah, and purpose is really important, because if we say to people, I go into an office and I type all day, that's not a purpose. Mm-hmm. That's a function. I met an insurance salesman once who said, I sell insurance. And I said, it's not very sexy, that, because my instinct is to disappear to the nearest toilet. And I said, why don't you tell people that you help them sleep at night? And he started doing that. And he said his business, grew quite quickly. Of course, people said to him, do you deal in Rohypnol? Do you walk about with a baseball bat? Are you an anaesthetist? He said, no, I help people find the right insurance so that their family, their business can sleep at night. Yeah. And I had a great example of this in South Beirut when I was over there. I'm half Lebanese, so that's why I was in Beirut. My aunt was dying, and I wanted to get over there before she died. As it happened, I couldn't. So I arrived 2 days after she died, and also 2 days after the bombing, which went on in 2006 for 2 weeks. And I took the very daring step of saying to a taxi driver, can you take me around South Beirut? Because I want to see what the damage has been. 2 weeks relentless bombing. And there you are, it's a horrible experience, because you see all the accoutrements of life, children's toys, little rags, bits of furniture that have been crushed, cars that have been flattened. And on the rubble, there was this guy who had out rails full of clothes, and he was selling clothing. And I said, that's very entrepreneurial. And by the way, the Lebanese are very entrepreneurial. During the war, I heard of a glazier who used to go around and plant during quiet times, you know, an incendiary device. And then the windows would blow out, and he'd come around 10 minutes later and say, you're looking for a glazier? That's entrepreneurial. But this guy, I said to him, you know, my taxi driver said that used to be a shop. And I said, my instinct was to focus on what he'd lost. I said, must have been terrible to lose your shop. And he shrugged his shoulder and says, I'm not a shopkeeper. I give people style and confidence. What does that tell you? The purpose over the vehicle that we use.
That's the definition of resilience, I think.
Yeah. And I said to the taxi driver, says, this is a road to Damascus moment for me. And he said, actually, you were on the road to Damascus, which I was.
Literally.
Yeah.
So we got a comment from MG Walsh. Do you want to come off mute and tell us that's quite an interesting question, I think.
Well, yes, that ties to the collaboration Mike and I have for some time. The biggest problem that I noticed, and I noticed that actually for years, is that we live in a world, at least pre-COVID, and it's still lingering, and I'm afraid it still would linger for some time. The world when everybody specializes, and so people do not have the ability to actually see everything in the various multidimensional platforms. And I don't mean only horizontal, I mean also vertical, because you have to have the width and you have to have the depth of it, and you have to have the length of it. So the big picture is a problem here. And if you don't see that big picture, you are not able to create anything that is meaningful, because you will ultimately only see the tip of your own nose, and that one will bury you.
You'll see what's in front of you. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, that's true, and you know, it can be a cultural thing, because you know, I always say to people, if you've ever seen a supermarket the morning after they've changed the layout, and people going in, and you know, suddenly their heart rate beats so much faster, they're just lost. Facebook have just changed the layout of the page, and people all over the place are saying, "What's happened? I can't use it anymore," because change can be a frightening thing to people, and we have to keep our minds open so that change is something that we accept as an ongoing, thrilling part of life.
Great. No, thanks for that. I think it is a challenge. I think actually events like this can help open people's minds as well, because it makes you think of the big picture.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah. So we have a question from Ailish. Ailish, do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, I was just wanting to ask, I remember you mentioned you mentioned today actually, like how you managed to bounce back from homelessness and get to the position that you're in today, like the mental battle or the physical one, or...
Right, well, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. Because I'm delighted to say it was thanks to an Irishman. Because he was busking in London, in Leicester Square. And I used to watch him every day, and he said, "Do you play the guitar?" And I said, "Actually, I do." So I took his guitar and he said, "Look, you should go to Dublin, because there's very few people doing busking in Dublin." I know it's hard to believe that nowadays. So I went to Dublin, someone paid my fare, and I picked up a guitar, and I found a Lebanese bongo player from nowhere. Don't ask me how all these things came together. But I was pretty successful, and I got invited to some of the parties with the Dubliners, you know, parties with Thin Lizzy, with Gary Moore, who had a band called Skid Row. So I was a bit of a cause célèbre as a busker. And that gave me a sense that, you know, what I had missed out on through my entire schooling, because I was expelled just as I turned 15, was this thing about performance. I loved performing. I loved the arts. I loved to talk, and I loved to play the guitar. So that was the beginning of it. And then I went back to London. I wanted to conquer London, and I got all kinds of jobs. I worked, you know, in steel, in on the building trade, across a whole range of industries. I did so many jobs. I had 29 jobs before I was 26. So I learnt so much from there. So it's just something that's evolved at every stage. But I know, having made that transition, that you can make a transition. That's the important thing. So, you know, when we say to people who are homeless, when we speak to them, we very rarely say to them, what are your dreams? Because we don't expect homeless people to have dreams. And yet they do. No one ever asks them that. They always ask them, you know, benign questions like, how long have you been homeless for? You know, where do you sleep at night? Have you been in touch with any of the services? But they have dreams. And I began to realize that my dreams were buried. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I hadn't realized there was a performer. And I did lots of things, you know, and then, you know, didn't set up in business until I was 43. So there's no rush.
No rush.
There's no rush.
I like that, but it does. I think not everybody manages to climb back from there. So there's something about the fact that you
I know.
clearly,
yeah, but it was
an inner drive to take you to believe in the dream.
Yeah,
yeah, amazing. Now I'm conscious of time. We're available to stay on for a few minutes after 1 o'clock, because as we've learned with our Causeway sessions, they often overrun because people like to stay on to chat. So we're not rushing off. But I know Aoife wants to mention, did you want to cover anything on forthcoming events, Aoife?
Yeah, I can do. There's a comment there from Heather. Her microphone isn't working. Just if we can do that first. She's wondering about, how do you persuade big business to change their ways when it's just like business as usual? How can you convince them to change their mindset?
Can
you see that comment?
Can I answer it?
Yes, please do.
Well, I mean, I don't have the magic answer, but when I was speaking in London and Google were there, Unilever were also there. And Unilever got a new chief executive in. Now, Unilever is one of these universally hated companies because it seemed to just, you know, sell and do nothing for the world. And this new chief executive came in and he said, you know, on my first day, I want to make an announcement. He said, we're a nasty company. We're going to have to change. So they did, you know, two things. One was they did research on how women felt about themselves. And the discovery was that 98% of women didn't think they were good enough. I hope that's changing. And also that water was a huge issue around the world. So have you seen the Dove sketches on YouTube? If you haven't, go on to Dove sketches in YouTube. And it's Unilever's way of engaging women and saying, you're far better, you're more beautiful than you think you are. And it's an incredibly clever way of doing that. I also point out to Professor Muhammad Yunus, who's a Nobel Prize winner. And I met him in Edinburgh when he came over to do a talk. And he was, you know, tackling poverty in Bangladesh. And he set up this bank, the Grameen Bank, to give microloans to women only. Why did he do it to women only? Because women were far more likely to invest that little bit of money into doing something that would bring money into their family and change their lives. Men were far more likely to retain the current status quo. Yeah, and part, I mean, he tackled poverty. I mean, it was reduced massively, but there was a problem in Bangladesh around child blindness because some of the vital vitamins were not being given to children. So one of the results was they were going blind. So he got a list of the vitamins that were lacking in their diet. And he went to Danone. Danone are a big French company who do yogurts and you know, those little drinks you get in supermarkets. And he said, I want you to produce a yogurt that has got all these vitamins in it. And I want you to be able to sell it at 1 rupee in Bangladesh. 1 rupee. But I want you to take a cut on that because I want the remainder of the rupee to go to the person who's going around the door selling it because they're going to be homeless people. So not only did he spread employment and the opportunity for people to go around doors and distribute this yogurt every day. He helped to almost obliterate child blindness. Now, these are big companies that you would have seen as fairly, intransigent. So I think the world now is open. I wouldn't like to take on ExxonMobil because they are so ingrained in the oil and gas industry. They've spent billions of pounds trying to persuade us that climate change is a bogus. But many companies now are knowing that they have to change. They have to change in a way that balances people, planet, and profit. And that is a move that I think is going to dominate the next few years of business development, because people will be very harsh on companies that are not doing the right thing, because we've got a young generation coming through. I have to say, our young people bring through a whole different set of values, and they will be very harsh in their consuming decisions. So companies know they have to change. As to how to get them to change or what direction, I think it's about writing with ideas and ask them to go and present to them.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Mike. And I think as well, it can sometimes feel overwhelming when you feel these large corporations are doing nothing. But actually, as illustrated by that yogurt story, you mightn't be able to change the world. But if you can change one tiny corner of the world for one person, it's incredible what can grow out of that. Yeah. So I'm going to ask, while Aoife is just getting the upcoming events there, Mike, I want to ask you as well. You've kindly given of your time freely to Causeway today, and I know people have really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about your business and what's happening with that now, and what you're up to.
Well, I mean, about 60% of my time I'm around the country speaking. Well, I'm not now because you can't assemble audiences, so I will do this on Zoom. I also help people to become much more impactful communicators. So I do a bit of training around that. And, creativity is a big thing for me. So I do these creative workshops, within companies where you can throw everything out the window and reassemble it in a way that people haven't really thought about. And this is about, widening the ideas to drive the company forward, and also looking at what kind of collaborations can be created. And people are incredibly resourceful and they're full of ideas, but they're never asked. It's extraordinary how people are answerable to bosses in the workplace, but they're very, very rarely asked what they would do if they were in the boss's position, or how they could improve the output of the company or the profit, or improve the speed. So you need people to be engaged in that process. Now I can help to do that. So I do a lot of speaking, and my last paid gig was the police chiefs in England and Wales. And that was extraordinary because I told them a story that they have been writing to me about ever since, saying it's changed one point of contact they have as part of their job. Isn't that extraordinary?
Wow.
So, coming from the outside is great. The story I told was I was in the cells one night in West End Central in London. And as I was being released the next day, the sergeant said, "What are your dreams?" And I said, "Oh, to get somewhere to stay and get a job." And he said, "No, those are your next steps. I'm asking what your dreams are." And I said, I had to think deep. And I said, "Well, I'd like to play music. I'd like to, perform. And one day I'd like to start my own business." Now, both of these have happened. But police chiefs said, "We don't ask that question." And they said, "We're going to start doing it now. We're going to instruct all our, people who make that point of contact to ask people what their dreams are." So there's a very small twist in how they operate.
And I'd say it's a question a lot of people don't ask that question. It's a great question to ask.
Yeah.
Aoife, do you want to just quickly summarize anything on our forthcoming events?
Yeah, so our next event after this one is remote working technology with another Causeway member, Lynn Richmond. She's going to talk about remote working, how you can protect yourself from cybercrime and fraud. So it sounds like quite an interesting event. Mike touched on the need to invest in young people. So Causeway is committed to this. So we have a young professionals career development and networking session. We have some young professionals here who are helping to develop that event. It's also for business leaders as well who want to network with this group of people. All are welcome, members, non-members, come along.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And then our Connecting with Causeway virtually event, we ran our first ever online event was actually a Connecting with Causeway back at the beginning of May. So we're going to repeat this again in October. Just while we can't do face-to-face meetups, we're going to have another online networking event. We're going to use breakout rooms, that kind of thing. So our members can get to know each other a bit better. What's good about the online is we can bring our members from Ireland, Scotland and Northern Ireland all together on the one place, which we wouldn't have been able to necessarily do it face-to-face. So that event should be quite good as well. And then there's another couple events in the pipeline, not quite confirmed yet. We held a really successful Growing Our Cities and the Climate Emergency event back in May. So we're going to run a series of workshops in that. They're in development at the moment. We're going to run sector specific events on food and drink. We're going to hopefully run an event on exporting and trading across the Irish Sea. And fingers crossed, we had to cancel our face-to-face awards this year, but we do hope to run our virtual awards in October. So that's it.
Great, thank you, Aoife. So there's lots in the pipeline, but as I said, we're taking a break in August from running events. So look out for all of those exciting events coming up. So I'm aware that we've run over time a bit, and a few people had to go. We've lots of very positive comments and people saying thank you. But before we wrap up, is there anything anybody else would like to add? Please feel free just to come off mute and shout out or raise your hand. Or have we covered everybody's questions? I know people are dropping off.
I say a warm welcome to Scott King. He's one of our newest Northern Irish members.
Oh, welcome.
That's good.
I thought you were on holiday in Wicklow camping, but that doesn't look like
that's in a couple of days.
In a couple of days.
Great.
Nice to see you at another Causeway event.
We love new members. Mike, thank you so much. That was just so enjoyable, and I could sit here for another hour listening to the stories and pearls of wisdom.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike. If you just stay on as everybody drops off for a couple of minutes, and Aoife, but we'll close the event now. Thank you so much, folks, and hopefully see you next time.